We've now released over 20 episodes of Beyond the B, diving into everything from B Corp controversies to the latest standards and what it means to go beyond certification. And now we'd love to hear from you. We created a new listener survey so we can hear from you. What's working? What do you want more of? What do you want less of? Your feedback will help shape the future of this podcast. It only takes a few minutes, and it'll make Beyond the B even more valuable for you. So just go to lifteconomy.com/survey. That's LIFT economy.com/survey, or click on the link in the show notes. Thanks so much for being part of this journey with us.
Welcome to Beyond the B, an ongoing dialogue about the past, present, and future of the B Corp movement. Co-hosts Emmy Allison and Ryan Honeyman facilitate an open and honest conversation about the B Corp movement, advise companies on how to increase their impact, and provide a deep dive into the new B Corp standards that are shaping our community.
I'm Ryan Honeyman, a partner at Lyft Economy. Our guest today is Marcel Fukayama. Marcel is a social entrepreneur and B Corp leader driving systemic change for a more equitable and sustainable economy. As co-founder of Denformo and a key figure in the B Corp movement, he leverages finance, innovation, and policy to address social and environmental challenges. With experience spanning the public, private, and nonprofit sectors, Marcel has held leadership roles at Sistema B and B Lab, promoting business as a force for good. He also contributes to public policy development, advising political leaders, and serving on impactful governance bodies. A cancer survivor and dedicated changemaker, Marcel's commitment to a better world began early in his career and continues to inspire action for a more inclusive global economy. Marcel, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Ryan. Hey, everyone. I'm so happy to be here. Ryan has done such a great work for the global movement for a long time. I remember when Ryan published the handbook, the B Corp handbook, and it was globally translated to many languages, including Portuguese in Brazil. And I personally myself engaged doing so. So, Ryan, thank you so much for putting this together, and I hope you have a great conversation for your audience as well.
Yeah. Thanks, Marcel. Yeah, I remember getting I think Portuguese was one of the first translations. I remember you all were quick on it.
Yes, because we had like a gold in our hands, right?
Yeah.
So your book was, even the original version was very well known, even in not only Brazil, but in all Latin America. So we translated in the region to both Portuguese and Spanish. We did a crowdfunding to do it. It was very well received by our regional ecosystem. So congratulations again.
Yeah, it's actually been, I haven't really talked about this, but it's actually been 10 years since that first edition came out. So, because my daughter is 10 years old and she was born on October 10th, 2014. I think the book came out on like October 7th, 2014. So however old my daughter is like how old the book is. It's funny.
Amazing. So it seems like we have an opportunity for a new edition.
Yes. So maybe for folks who don't know much about you, so can you give us a bit about your background and some of the things you're up to before you got involved in the B Corp movement?
Absolutely. Yes. So I am Marcel. I'm from Brazil. I'm 40 years old. I'm based in São Paulo, where I was born and raised. São Paulo is the largest city in Brazil with 12 million people in a metropolitan area with 22 million people. So it's a huge place. So since when I was 17, when I created my first venture, I've tried to use business as a force for good. So it was early 2000s when I decided to create an internet cafe with the mission to democratize internet access in our country. A few years later, it was confirmed that internet cafes were responsible for half of the internet access in Brazil. I set up a small chain. I set up also associations to work with policymakers to regulate this business. And I created also a program for digital inclusion in internet cafes. So I spent great part of my life doing this and over actually 7 years. And that's when I was diagnosed with cancer. And I was 23. And that's the type of thing that happens. You never think about it. I mean, especially when you are 23, you think that life is unlimited, right? So that changed my life, that shaped my decisions. And one of my decisions was to give one more step in my journey as human being. And I decided to work with tech education at that point, using internet cafes as a channel to do it. And I joined a nonprofit, which is a global nonprofit from Brazil called CDI at that point. Today is called Recode. So I became executive director of that organization, and I brought the concept of social business to this organization. And we created a hybrid organization with a nonprofit, as it was originally created, and a for-profit. And this for-profit was a fundraising with an impact investment fund when I learned about a tool called the Gears. Gears is Global Impact
Yeah.
Investing Rating System, right? And I realized that this impact investing fund was a Gears pioneer. I went through the process, and it was 2010 when I got a report asking, "Are you a certified B Corp? Yes or no?" In my case, was no. So that made me feel like curious to learn more about what means B Corp, and that's when I found bcorporation.net, and I saw a North American community of 300 plus certified B Corps in the region, majority in the US. And I thought, wow, this cannot be North American. This should be global. And I had an opportunity to fly to B Lab and offered them the opportunity to create B Lab Brazil. And they connected me with some people in Chile. They said to me, "Hey, that's nice. It's a great idea. Why don't you talk to some partners that we are setting up in Chile? They are setting up System B in Chile, and maybe you can collaborate." And that's exactly what happened. System B was created in Chile, Argentina, and Colombia, and we summed efforts to launch in Brazil. And System B Brazil was created in October 2013. That's how I connected with the B Corp movement. And today, I've played different roles in the impact ecosystem. One is to in the B Corp movement, having set up System B Brazil. I'm still part of the governance, leading the expansion of the movement in Latin America and the Caribbean as former ED, Executive Director of System B International. And I also spent some time at B Lab Global as the head of global policy, but today I'm an advisor, senior policy advisor, supporting B Lab in strengthening these strategies. So that's one role. But another role that I have is in my own B Corp. Today, I have a company, as you did mention in the description, it's called Dynamo or Dynamo. Basically, what we do, we work with impact investment, blended finance, and impact ecosystem strengthening here in Brazil for over 12 years with my business partner. I've been doing it. And also, I am policymaking passionate. So when I got back from my master's degree in London, I had the opportunity to run a presidential campaign for the current environment minister, Marina Silva. It was 2018. That's my connection with public policy. And today I'm member of two advisory boards or councils to Brazilian government. One to the National Strategy for Impact Economy, and second for the Brazil Presidency's Advisory Council, so supporting Lula administration to foster a new economy. So this is a bit about me. I love governance more by pain than by love, but I understand the role of governance. So I've supported governance for different nonprofits and for-profits in Brazil. And also, I'm father of Martina, and that's my main role. Martina is a almost 4-year-old daughter. She is the best gift I have in my life. So sorry for the long introduction, but that's how a systemic player can, develop different roles. Yes.
Yeah. Very systemic across multiple areas of impact, especially fatherhood. I realize I butchered the name of your company. It's Dynamo, not Din for Mo. So apologies.
No problem. It's because we write with the number four, the letter A, dynamo. And one of the reasons is because it's the only number that connects the dots. And that's the one of the roles that we want to play, connect the dots in the ecosystem.
Ah, very cool. Maybe we can talk about some of those early days in Sistema B, Brazil. So you founded in 2013, and what were some of the initial challenges or like what was the reception from companies in those sort of earlier days for the B Corp movement?
Well, that's a great question. I think it's important to acknowledge the role that Brazil has had in corporate sustainability. I mean, since 1992, when Rio hosted the Earth Summit or Rio 92, Brazil played a key role during late 90s, early 2000s. The corporate sustainability was absolutely fundamental in Brazil. The civic society organizations thrived. And basically, Brazil demonstrated that businesses can play an important role to have social impact. But during 2010s, this decade, things changed, mainly because Professor Muhammad Yunus was awarded a Nobel Peace in 2006. He introduced the concept of social business, and then Brazil realized that businesses can play a different role. It's not about philanthropy. It's not about social responsibility anymore. It's about embedding impact in their business model. So that's, I think, a new chapter of corporate social responsibility. And it was very mature in Brazil, much more mature than any other country in Latin America. But we saw this opportunity. So when we launched Sistema B in 2013, I think the first thing was to identify ecosystem players that could help us launching the movement here. It was not just a new big thing, but we needed to honor those who have worked on this ecosystem for many years. So we invited very historical organizations like Instituto Ethos and some others. So the mapping, identifying ecosystem players was the first thing. The second thing was to connect with potential fundraisers and supporters. So Guilherme Leal, the co-founder of Natura, was the very first one that I connected and said to him, hey, we need to bring Sistema B to Brazil. We need to create this movement here. Your history, your track record, your company, there is no way to think about B Corp movement without thinking about Natura. And after my presentation, Guilherme said to me, hey, firstly, he punched the table, the desk that he was on. He punched the desk and said, hey, I am a B entrepreneur. Yeah, well, yeah, Guilherme, of course you are. Yeah, 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 let's do this. And then he put his foundation to support us financially and organizationally, Instituto Europeu. And Natura started the process to certify. And 18 months later, Natura certified as the first publicly traded company as a B Corp. And also we connected with BMW Foundation and also a local foundation in Brazil. And then we joined efforts and launched Sistema B. So mapping the ecosystem, providing this infrastructure for co-creation, I think it was absolutely crucial for Sistema B. We got together with over 300 people in the morning of October 24th of 2013 in Sao Paulo to celebrate the co-creation of Sistema B. That's how we started. We had at that point 4 B Corps. We announced in that morning 3 more B Corps. And today there are over 350 certified B Corps, 15,000 businesses using the B Impact Assessment in the country, and a pipeline of over 10,000 businesses, and the largest number of publicly traded companies certified as B Corp. So we are very proud, but still aware that we need to give one step forward, keep our relevance and our vision to create a new economic system that is more inclusive, equitable, and regenerative.
Brilliant. I heard you also say you were executive director of Sistema B International.
I was, yeah.
What is Sistema B International and like what did your role involve there?
Yeah. So we created Sistema B International to be the partner of B Lab in Latin America. So we didn't want to call B Lab Latin America because we needed something more localized. So we created Sistema B in Chile, Colombia, Argentina, as I mentioned before, then Brazil. Then we expanded it to other six plus countries to overall 19 countries in the region. So, and then we created a legal entity called Sistema B International to be the licensee of the B Corp brand in the region and to offer the B Corp certification in the region. So I spent part of my time as executive director of this organization and basically more than just certify companies and growing and strengthening the B Corp movement in the region. I think one of the greatest contribution of Sistema B to the B Corp movement was to bring the ecosystem building approach to the movement. It's B Corps are very important, but not enough. So how can we build infrastructure for this ecosystem? So we need to talk to investors. We need to engage opinion leaders. We need to work with academics. We need to engage policymakers. So this ecosystem building of Sistema B was absolutely crucial. And I think it was the inflection point of the growth of the B Corp movement, not only in Latin America, but globally, because the other global partners that emerged after Sistema B adopted in each way, they adopted this model, and we've seen the growth of the movement exponentially. But in Latin America, I think my greatest challenge as executive director was during COVID. That impacted dramatically my leadership. And mainly because Latin America was the most affected region by COVID between 2020 and 2023, I'd say. So more than 8 million people affected, 2 million people died in the region, 40 million people lost jobs. And that's a region composed of 80% of SMEs, small and medium enterprises. So Sistema B was directly affected by COVID because our community was affected. So in response to COVID, one of the initiatives that we put together was called G3, or it was in Spanish, but in Spanish and Portuguese, but in English was like the International Working Group for Economic Reactivation. So was an working group that we created to, hey, let's take advantage of the pandemic and let's promote a leapfrog and change the rules of the game in the region. So in the end of COVID, we had a community of 1,200 policymakers, public leaders in general, from 32 countries that got together in a summit celebrating new rules of the game for new economy. So there are three propositions, including the benefit corp legislation. It's not a coincidence why Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, Uruguay, and Panama have passed benefit corp legislation. It's because of this momentum that we created. We also introduced other propositions like public procurement. 15% of the regional GDP in Latin America come from public procurement. So governments are a crucial market player. So if we want to create a new economy, we need to engage governments. So we introduced in different jurisdictions, like in Mendoza, for instance, legislations that enabled procurement, public procurements to select B Corps, local B Corps, or companies that were using B impact assessment as a preference in the region. And finally, we created an institutional framework for a new economy. So Brazil passed during COVID different legislations to enable new strategy for impact economy. It's called En Impacto, and now we have a national system for that. And different jurisdictions in Brazil are passing this local and regional legislation. It's being a platform for different policies that foster new economy. So I think COVID was like an opportunity, to introduce these. And under my leadership in System of International, that was possible.
Yeah. In Sistema Bay International, so you're responsible for like basically any Latin American country, including Mexico, and sort of expanding the movement there, even if there wasn't like a regional office in that country.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So we at that point, and you still have 10 offices across Latin America in 10 countries, and we operate in 19 countries through these 10 offices. And Systema B International is like the orchestrator for the region
Yeah.
in doing this. Yeah.
Okay, got it. And so, you mentioned some policy work that you'd done, and you, for many years, tell me if what years were you leading Sistema Bay International? Do you remember which years that was?
Between 2019 and 2022 as executive, but before that as board member. Yeah.
Okay. And then you were head of global policy for B Lab Global, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Since 2021.
You had a lot of hats.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I took an additional role. I remember when Andrew Cassoy called me and said, "Hey, we need to put together a global strategy for policy right now. Let's take the advantage of COVID, what you're doing in Latin America. Let's do this." Even with the role of ED for System of International, I accepted this challenge, to start putting together along our theory of change, a strategy to change the rules of the game for a new economy. So, and we did that. We have done, since 2010, some fragmented policies, which is majority called Benefit Corp for US states have passed this legislation, but we didn't have global strategy, a coordinated policy strategy. So that was my main contribution from 2021 to 24 when I left executive role to play an advisory role.
Okay. Yeah. So talk about that strategy when you were head of global policy. So what were your objectives and how did you think about a policy approach for B Lab?
Yeah, well, today we have almost 10,000 certified B Corps. It's a remarkable number. It's an impressive number. It's a nice number. But if you really want to change the economic system, if you want to foster this transition, it's not enough. According to the World Bank, there are 125 million businesses in our planet, most of them in the US with plus 50 million, EU with plus 27 million, Brazil with 19 million businesses registered and active. So, how can you empower all of those businesses to behave like B Corp with purpose, accountability, and transparency? That's the key question, right? And that's the question that makes our work relevant. It's not about certifying businesses, it's about building a global movement. It's about building a community of business leaders that are using business as a force for good and demonstrating that behaving like this, you have value to the market, to society, to our planet. So, in order to do so, we need to change structure, we need to change culture, we need to change behavior. And to change structure, we need to change the rules of the game. We need to change legislations, policies, norms. So, since 2010, BayLab in the US has promoted the benefit corporate legislation. There are over 15,000 registered benefit corps in plus 44 states in the US and other 8 countries: Italy, in Spain, in Europe, and in Latin America, as I did mention before, in Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, Uruguay, and Panama.
That's pretty impressive, by the way, that there's six in Latin America.
Yeah, and there are other 15 plus countries introducing their Congress or parliaments. In Latin America, we have Chile, Argentina, Brazil, Mexico as well. But the most innovative proposal, I think, is the UK. The UK has called as the Better Business Act. It makes a default for every single business incorporated in the UK. It's a very ambitious proposal. Of course, it's challenging to pass in the UK Parliament, mainly because of the context, but still, it has created important conversations in business society. So I think it's important thing. But this is the regulatory approach. Policy is also about a self-regulatory approach, which means that market players, market regulatory bodies can work together to change behaviors and to shape a new business culture. So now we are working with a large stock exchange, one of the largest in the world, to create a B Corp index, which means an index composed of publicly traded B Corps in different stages. So the first stage is to bring only certified B Corps that are publicly traded. Today we have 69 B Corps that are publicly traded across the planet. The second stage is to bring benefit corps that are publicly traded, and we have 150 plus. And then any publicly traded company that wants to behave like B Corp can be listed according to specific criteria. So the goal of this index is to provide a qualified list to investors in capital markets of companies that are truly doing the best for the world and certified by a third party independent organization. And also these would reduce the cost for investors to look for these companies. And also, as an outcome, we want to create an evidence that these companies are not only thriving, but they are creating more profitable results to investors. So this index is now under incubation phase, and we want to make it public in mid 2025. So this is the very first time, Ryan, that I'm talking about this publicly. So this is a big deal for us, and we are very much looking forward to this product. This is a winning product for capital markets because if you want to change the economic system, we need to work with the mainstream of business sector and the mainstream of capital markets, and we're very much looking forward to it.
That's fantastic. So you're not allowed to say which stock exchange at this
Not
point?
for now. Not for
Okay.
now. But it's a big one. You probably know
Okay.
them.
Fair enough. It's good to hear that you are involved in policy because, to be honest, I gravitated towards the B Corp movement because it feels like business is more nimble to like do things and policy just takes forever. And I get like overwhelmed by thinking about policy change. What would you say is needed for more policy? I guess, how would you encourage more people who feel like me who just sort of avoid government because it seems complex and confusing? Like, what are some ideas or ways that you've approached it that have helped you sort of focus and maybe like get policy passed, or like how have you sort of motivated yourself to engage with government, which can be very difficult and challenging at times?
Yeah, it's a great question because maybe today it's even more complex and challenging than the past. So the way how we have approached is that this is a positive agenda for policymaker, mainly because it helps the state to play their role to enable a favorable environment for business to thrive. And this is a risk mitigating initiative. This is a behavior change platform that creates incentive structure for market players to play, including funding, credit, including public procurement, as I was saying before. And as a state actor, a policymaker just have to unlock, enable, to facilitate this. And by implementing a benefit corp legislation, it's a way to do so. So it's a matter of language. However, I feel that today the world is more complex. The anti-ESG movement in the US, the normative tsunami in Europe, the anti-woke movements emerging across the planet. These different things have made our work a bit harder. So we need to adjust our wording. So maybe we're not talking about purpose-driven businesses. Maybe we're not talking about impact businesses. Maybe we're talking about responsible business, responsible investment, not impact investment. So that may be a matter of wording. It is still puzzling to us whether it works, but definitely we need to adjust our positioning in face of the context that we have with conservative, extreme governments that have taken different markets. So that's our repositioning. So that's why the role of B Corps is very important because it's a self-regulatory approach. So those 10,000 B Corp leaders have demonstrated that regardless of the government, they can thrive, they can inspire lead, influence, a path for others to follow. So that makes the current context makes the work of B Corp movement even more important to bring resilience, to bring resistance in face of the challenges that we have as climate emergency, inequalities, and geopolitics.
You mentioned in the B Corp exchange you're creating, and just more broadly, the importance of bringing in big players. So, I think one of the critiques of the B Corp movement is, hey, it's great, but it's all 10-person marketing companies and, service based, a lot of it is service based companies. Maybe I don't actually know the exact number, but I've heard it points like 60% is like small, service companies. So what do you think about the perennial debate about, is there a risk or danger of allowing multinationals, and, as maybe evidenced by what happened with Unilever? I'm not sure what the latest is with Natura, but I know that it's been rough for them too. But with companies who still have a public market obligation, even if maybe they are a benefit corp, it's still profit maximization, still is like a pressure for a lot of those companies. So I guess, how are you feeling about the necessity of bringing them in, but also the risk of like not diluting the movement? Or yeah, how do you
Yeah,
balance that?
that's, I think, the key question for the growth of the movement. How we scale with integrity. That's the key question, right? And how we harmonize the challenge to grow the movement and not, losing our mojo. That's the spirit of, we have a spirit of community. We have a peer-to-peer network of business leaders that are sharing best practices, sharing challenges. So, and as we grow, we may lose these. Well, I think we do have these challenges on the table. And we also acknowledge the role of MNCs, multinational corporations, in changing the capitalism and promote the transition to a new economic paradigm. We acknowledge that. We recognize how important they are. And that's why we have engaged them in doing so. Like I said before, we are engaging the mainstream of capital markets, but we are also engaging the mainstream of business sector with multinational corporations. So there are many multinational corporations that have embraced the movement. They have certified their subsidiaries. They have acquired B Corps. They have made commitments like Danone with a 10-year agreement and commitment to certify as a B Corp. So it's a long journey, long process that we know it's not perfect, but we acknowledge that we can do it better every day. I think there is not an answer for your question, but there are some elements, and one of them is first, these are acknowledgements. MNCs have to be engaged. Second, also the recognition that as we grow, we bring these challenges to our community, and how we grow, not losing this sense of community and belonging. I think we haven't addressed properly yet, but we are aware of this challenge. And that's why we understand that the way how we got here, almost after 2 decades, it's not the way how we're going to move forward. We need to reshape our governance. We need to reshape our management. We need to evolve our standards. To be a B Corp, have to be an inspiration and aspiration, transpiration. You know that. You are a B Corp leader, and you know how difficult it is. You wrote a book about the standards, the B Corp standards. So that's why we are launching the evolvement of our standards, a new set of standards to assure that our standards remain in the frontier of innovation and set the bar very high, that being a B Corp is not just about narrative. It's not just about image or a seal that you put in your product. You have to make tough decisions. You have to renounce things. You have to make choice. You have to engage. You have to, more than just make commitments, you have to take action. And that's what you want to pursue, as we have done for 2 decades almost. And that's what you want to keep doing. So just a few elements to dialogue with your question. I think let's keep working together to do it.
Absolutely. We've talked about this in the past, and this idea of, you and I have been involved in the B Corp movement for a while, and we kind of talked about this idea of the mojo. It was like everything was, there's a lot of momentum and positivity, and around, it seems like 2019, 2020, definitely during COVID, the B Corp community had lost its mojo, not fully, but it was just sort of like floating a bit. And I'm curious, from your perspective, what have you seen? What's your sort of analysis of like why that B Corp community has had a tougher time than maybe pre-COVID?
Well, since COVID, we've had different issues. One of them was, I think we spent a lot of time stuck in our internal issues. That means leadership transition, that means the evolvement of our own standards, our business model. So our business model, just to give you more info about this, it's a tough business model to fund. I mean, it's really difficult to find who can fund systems change. Many philanthropists want to fund projects with concrete output, concrete outcome in the end, in a territory, in a community, while systems change is a long-term shot with a very intangible or not so specific outcomes. So harder to track. So being a backbone organization like BLab is very difficult to sustain. And I think COVID brought this challenge to us, as I was mentioning in the level of System International. That happened in the level of all global partners, including BLab. So we got stuck at some point figuring out what to do with our business model, which is great part of the income from philanthropy and an important part from certification fees. So in terms of business model, we do have an incentive to certify more and more company, but is what we need? We are sure that no, it's not about certifying businesses, this movement, right? So that was one trick part. The other trick part was the leadership transition. During COVID, we shifted from founder-led organization to an executive-led organization. This is, for many organizations, this is traumatic. This is, I'd say, the major shift in the history of any organization. And that what happened to us. And I think we overcame this challenge today. It took time. It took a long time. You have to make important choices along this journey. So, and the other thing was the standards, right? The standards, we need to keep this movement relevant. And for a long time, we got stuck in our internal kitchen, just thinking, what is the best standard for, living wage or whatever? Is it possible to be a B Corp if we're not net zero? How we are proving that B Corps are truly reducing inequalities? This type of key questions. And I think we spent some time self-centric in these conversations while the world was moving towards other directions. But now our new standards are live and they will go to market in the end of 2025. And we are confident that with this leadership, with these new standards, with the redesigned business model, we are ready to create a new chapter of the movement. Remembering that movement, we do not have control. The BillLab Global Network is, between quotes, just a facilitator of this movement. This movement is relying on business leaders like you, like me, and others who are listening to this conversation. So we need to re-engage with these business leaders to reconnect with the essence, with the origin of this certification and this movement. So I think we have a very interesting time ahead, challenging though, but I think we're in a good position to reconnect and rebuild trust.
Yeah, I agree that the positioning is good currently. In terms of the business model for the entities, maybe previously, I think in the US, maybe this is probably old data, but it was the majority of funding was philanthropic. It wasn't coming from certifications. And is that similar for a lot of the other entities? Like, is it still majority philanthropic?
Yeah, during COVID, it was. And that's when we made a difficult decision to change the curve and reduce the dependency of philanthropy and leverage earned incomes like certification and other programs. We've developed many other services programs like the movement builder program. We launched the B Leaders, the B Corp pathway. There are many programs that we have in place today, services in order to diversify our earned income strategy. But I agree with you. You are right that in the past we had to rely a lot on philanthropy. We still rely a lot, mainly when we want to innovate. So we try to engage some philanthropic partners to invest in order to design, develop a new product. So the product that I did mention to you with stock exchange, it was partially funded by philanthropy or venture philanthropy, I'd say. Those philanthropists that believe that they can have like an exit strategy, so they can provide like a seed capital, non-refundable capital, so you can develop the innovation and the product, and then it can be self-sustainable in near future.
Yeah. And I think that's probably, you're speaking to why it was difficult as well, because the certification fees for small companies, there's a lot of small companies that were B Corps, and it was, I think the certification fees were artificially low. It was like B Lab was losing a lot of money on like all these small companies. And so it's like part of that business model changes. We actually have to raise the fees up to at least our cost or something to like be sustainable as a business. But then the B Corps are going to be frustrated because it feels like there's what's up with this big price increase, but it's more just that's the reality of what it would actually cost B
Yeah,
Lab.
for a long time, B Lab subsidized the certification fee, mainly for those businesses below $10 million in revenue. So it was a conscious decision because B-Lab was always aware that and conscious that SMEs are important and part of the reason of these movements. So how we move forward, not leaving anyone behind, or not leaving those who made this movement a movement behind. So B-Lab was really careful about this. And maybe that's one of the reasons why we spent so long time thinking about the business model, the governance, etc. Lights and shadows, right? So the upside of these conversations that we never lost the essence, or at least the thought of the essence of those who contributed to make this movement one of the most innovative economic movements in our history.
Yeah, it does seem like B Lab, for whatever happened during COVID and the rocky couple years, it does feel like with the new standards and the new global governance sort of structure, that it does feel like in the right direction. Like there's more of that mojo coming back. In terms of, thinking about and preparing for the new set of standards, how are you all? Well, I guess you're on the board still of Sistema B Brazil,
Brazil,
or
yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
How are you sort of preparing for that, and what sort of support do you anticipate offering companies, or been the preparation that your organization's been making for the new standards?
Well, there are different approaches. One of them is to incentivize them to certify and submit actually their B impact assessment before the deadline, which is an advantage. The second is we've been negotiating like a waiving or a grace period for SMEs from different sectors and size. So SMEs, to not be left behind in this transition. That's a second thing, because we do have, in case of Brazil, over 90% of certified B Corps here are SMEs and over 60% services. So it's a challenge for them to comply with the new set of standards. So the grace period is something for them that we've been talking about. And another thing, we are creating a journey for those businesses that are already certified to improve their practices and to meet with the new set of standards. including living wage, including net zero, how they decarbonize their operation, their business model, their value chain is something that we are working on to help them prevailing in this journey as a B Corp.
Do you have a network of, in the US, we have B consultants. There's maybe, gosh, probably like 50 companies who have taken a training by B Lab. So they're like official B consultants, but there's probably another 100 or 50, something like 100, 150 people or folks helping companies certify. Do you have a similar type thing in Brazil or other parts of Latin America? Yeah.
We do because we do have a program called B Multipliers. This was
Mhm.
created by Sistema B across Latin America, and in Brazil we do have this network that is very strong. Hundreds of people take this program and training program per year, and some of them become specialists or consultants, and they have supported other B Corps to improve their practices and prospective B Corps to pursue the B Corp certification. So yeah, it's a strong community, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good to know. Actually, I remember when I went to Chile for, I think this was 2015 with Juan Pablo, because I think they just published the Spanish edition of the B Corp handbook. And I think I spoke to some consultants down there who were starting, is it Multiplicadores B or
Mm-hmm.
something? I feel like
Multiplicadores B. Yeah.
yeah, I butchered the Spanish on that one. But yeah, that's great to hear that you have that community. Well, looking forward, what are you hoping for on the policy side for the sort of B Corp movement? And then maybe how can the B Corp movement continue to remain relevant and be impactful moving forward?
Ooh. Looking forward in terms of policy, I'd see the B Corp movement still offering concrete propositions for policymakers to establish a new corporate form for businesses to behave like B Corp and being more innovative, not through voluntary adoption, but mandatory adoption. That would be definitely like the ultimate goal because that's a way to really complete the structural change that we envision for policy. So all businesses in our planet behaving like B Corp, this is one of the ultimate goals in policy, or I mean, intermediate goal for an ultimate goal, so all people can thrive in inclusive, equitable, and regenerative economy. In terms of the context for this, it's quite challenging. So I envision the B Corp movement creating island of coherence, resilience, and resistance across different jurisdictions where a B Corp or advocating for ESG or for climate or anything else. Many jurisdictions doing this now, you can face retaliation from consumers, from investors, from there is a setback today in the context. There is a backlash. We see great players saying we are no longer talking about the SCG, we are talking about other things, but not doing this. Since the new administration in the US, we have read many decisions from market players resigning these agendas. So the context is very challenging. I'd envision the B Corp movement creating this island of coherence, resistance, and resilience of these practices because the diversity, equity, and inclusion agenda, it's not over. The role of businesses to reduce inequality is not over, and reducing the climate emergency is not over. So this year, Oxfam released a report saying that in less than 10 years, we may have the first 5 trillionaires in our planet. Trillionaire. We may not realize the size, the time dimension of this wealth, right? But let's make an exercise. Let's transform money in time. So for each second is a dollar. So let's say you have a wealth of $100,000 and you have a wealth of $1 trillion, right? If you have $100,000, that's equivalent of 27 hours. If you have $1 trillion, it's equivalent of over 300 centuries. It's obscene, this distortion. What justify one human being only having, 27 hours versus one human being with hundreds of centuries? It's a whole distortion. It's a market failure. We need to address that somehow. And B Corps can be not the silver bullet, but a response in terms of how you can create an economy in which people do not only survive, but they thrive. So prosperity, durable and shareable prosperity is what B Corps can deliver. Anyway, it's a very difficult challenge, but I envision that B Corps can still be the evidence of this whole new possible world.
And maybe you could speak as we're moving towards wrapping up Dynamo and like what you're doing to sort of like help build that new economy
Oh,
with your work. Yeah.
Oh, that's a great question. Well, Dynamo is one of my passions that I created with my business partner almost 13 years ago. And basically, we do three things. One, we support impact businesses to improve their impact and their business model. So we have like an acceleration program. We have supported over 130 different businesses. This is one thing that we do. The second thing that we do, we mobilize capital for positive impact. That's and you've been pioneer doing this in Brazil. We are pioneer in crowd equity, in blended finance. So we've been the most innovative initiative in Brazil to mobilize capital for impact initiatives. And by the way, because of this thing, we've been now leading the reconstruction of south of Brazil after the floods that Brazil had in 2024. It was the most extreme climate event that we ever had. 10 million people were affected. 500,000 people were displaced. So now we are involved in the reconstruction of south of Brazil in investing in housing, education, support to SMEs, and urban solutions. We have mobilized over $100 million in this reconstruction. So this is one thing that we do, the mobilizing capital for positive impact. And the third thing that we do is strengthening the ecosystem. And we do this by ecosystem building. We represent in Brazil the GSG Impact, which is the organization that created the impact investing field in the UK. We also represent Convergence Finance, a Canadian organization that is like a think tank in blended finance. We have systemic leadership development programs. We have advocacy and public policy initiatives. So anyway, everything that we do to strengthen the ecosystem is in this third dimension of Dynamo. So that's a bit about Dynamo in practice. It's a place where I have allocated a great part of my time today. Yes.
That's excellent. And maybe you could drop what's the website and where folks can learn more about that project.
Sure. It's dynamo.com is DIN4MO.com. You can find more information or in our LinkedIn or social medias as well.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this. Is there anything else you need right now, maybe from the listeners or, yeah, how can people continue to support you and your various initiatives?
Great question. Thank you for the offering. Well, let's stay tuned. Let's stay connected. I think we need to build this island of coherence, resistance, and resilience. And to do so, we need to be connected. So let's stay connected in beyond the B in our LinkedIn networks, etc. This is one thing. The second thing, we need to start talking about the role of business in this tough context, this polycrisis, geopolitics, climate emergency, inequalities. What is the key role of businesses in this new context in which we have anti-ESG movements emerging? So we need to talk about this. We cannot be silent. Silence is a response, and that's not the appropriate one in this context. So we need to talk about this. It's what the Greek did in the past with the agora. That's the origin of democracy. talking with the different, right? So that's another thing, raising awareness of the role of business and business leaders in this tough context, mainly in the Western democracies. And lastly, I think take action, engage your policymaker in your region about new rules of the game, new policies that can thrive, a new economy that create a favorable environment for businesses to contribute to the national determined contributions, the NDCs of your country that is part of the Paris Agreement. There are a whole set of policies that we need to talk about. Stay connected through the bcorporation.net, and there is a whole page about our policy strategy and our stakeholder governance strategy. So maybe that's another concrete way that we can join forces to change the rules of the game for a new economic paradigm.
Well, thank you, Marcel, for joining. It's great to reconnect, stay in touch all these years. Seems we're still doing the good work. We may have a little more gray hair than before, but
That's true. That's right. Well, Ryan, I truly admire your work, your leadership, and thank you so much for putting this together. And thank you so much for creating this space, not only for me, but for other B Corp leaders. Yeah, you've been such a great, relevant, and important voice during these decades. And I look forward to staying connected and working with you to make this movement very relevant and impactful for this new economic paradigm. So thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks, Marcel. Thank you for listening to Beyond the Bee. We are trying to grow our audience and wanted to ask you a huge favor that you can do right now. Try to think of one person that might like this show. Then pull out your phone and text them something like, "Hey, I think you might like this new podcast, Beyond the Bee. Check it out at lifteconomy.com/beyond. You can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts." Seriously, try to text someone right now. Pull out your phone. Then follow up with them to see how they liked it. This would be super helpful for us. We deeply appreciate your support.